It wasn't just a quiet cafe. It was a stitched-together sanctuary, woven from steam, jazz, and the kind of stillness that invites peace instead of attention. The Elm Tree Cafe didn't ask for noise. It offered space for readers, thinkers, wanderers, and people who just needed the world to hush. It was the kind of place where soft jazz mingled with the clink of mugs, and conversations happened in nods or the soft shuffle of newspapers. On a slow Saturday morning in Portland, Oregon, two sisters sat in the back corner, the kind of corner where silence had rights and everything sacred moved slow. And in that moment, no one noticed them. And that's exactly how it should have stayed. Because sometimes, when you feel most at ease, is when the world decides it's time to test you. What happened next was not only a lesson for the aggressive woman, but also a powerful reminder of empathy, responsibility, and the ongoing fight for equal dignity. We're about to share a powerful moment of truth. But first, leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Tiana Blake, 21, sat with the paperback in her hands and her shoulders curved forward like she was reading a secret. Her long braids hung down like velvet ropes, and her breath was steady, soft, unbothered. She read the way some people prayed. She didn't just sit in that cafe, she belonged to it. Her presence was quiet but not apologetic. She didn't shrink. She settled. Across from her sat her older sister Simone, 26, espresso in hand, eyes flicking between headlines and protective instinct. Simone was all fire in leather, cropped curls dyed auburn, posture sharp, eyes always scanning. She wasn't paranoid. She was prepared. Where Tiana read to retreat, Simone watched to protect. They didn't talk much when they were out together. They didn't need to. That was the rhythm they built together. One page at a time, one watchful glance at a time. Sisters who knew how the world worked, especially when the world didn't know how to sit still when two black women dared to exist in peace. And then the door opened, like a record scratch. Chloe Weller walked in, like she'd been cast in a movie only she knew about. Loud heels, too much perfume, sunglasses indoors, and a fake designer bag with real attitude. Her voice sliced through the cafe like a fork dragging across china. She didn't ask if there was gluten-free. She announced she wasn't technically celiac, just intuitive. The barista, bless him, nodded with the terror of someone who's about to get a Yelp review instead of a tip. Chloe moved through the space like she owned it. Her gaze skimmed every table like she was doing a roll call for who belonged. And when she spotted Tiana, her pace changed. She stopped, tilted her head, like she was trying to figure out a riddle she couldn't quite name, but didn't like the look of. She walked over and tilted her voice to that patronizing pitch only the truly entitled can perfect. "Is she okay?" she asked Simone, gesturing with her acrylic-nailed hand toward Tiana. "She's just sitting there, staring." Simone blinked once. "She's reading." Chloe fake laughed, leaned in. "No, of course. I mean, sure, but it's just intense. Her energy's off. I'm an empath. I feel things." Tiana didn't look up yet. She didn't need to. She'd heard this before, in different rooms with different words, but the same tone. The one that says your calm is unnerving, your presence is too big, and your skin is too loud. "If you're uncomfortable," Simone said calmly, "you're welcome to sit somewhere else." Chloe didn't. Instead, she asked, "Is she on the spectrum? Or something?" Simone stood. Not quickly, not loudly, but with finality. "Walk away." Chloe smiled, not kindly. "I feel unsafe," she said, louder now, eyes darting to the barista, to other tables. She was staring at me, judging me. Tiana looked up then, not because she was scared, but because she was tired. Her eyes met Chloe's, calm and confused, but Chloe had already decided she was the victim in a story she invented. "People like her," she said, finger jabbing, "with that look." And that's when two men stood from a nearby table. Quiet, calm and direct. They flashed their badges. Off-duty detectives. "Ma'am," one said, "step back." "Now." Chloe's mouth stayed open, but no words came out, because sometimes danger doesn't shout. It steams. And now the pot was boiling. The cafe didn't gasp. It convulsed. 1 second, the room was tense and silent. The next, a flash. Chloe's hand snapped forward, and the cup, steaming half full of hot blood filled with all the entitlement she could pour, sailed through the air. It struck with a splatter across Tiana's collarbone and chest, the liquid branding her like the world finally said what it really thought. She gasped, barely a sound, her hands flying up instinctively, the book tumbling from her lap. Hot coffee soaked her sweater, scalding her skin, blistering her piece. The cup bounced, rolled, and settled like a gavel nobody asked for. She didn't scream. She didn't cry out. Her breath caught, like it wanted to leave her body but wasn't sure how. And in that stillness, the real violence echoed. Not in volume, but in violation. Because what Chloe threw wasn't just a drink, it was a judgment. Tables screeched, silverware clattered. The cafe erupted not into chaos, but alarm. A barista dropped a plate. A woman screamed. Chairs shifted as people stood, unsure whether to move forward or backward. Simone was already by Tiana's side, crouched low, her hands gentle but her voice sharp. "Hey, hey, look at me." "It's okay. You're okay." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. The detectives were on Chloe in a flash, grabbing her wrist, cuffing her mid-squawk as she screamed about feeling threatened, about reverse discrimination, about psychic attacks. Her words spun in the air like cheap perfume, loud, offensive, forgettable. Tiana didn't say anything. Her eyes had gone wide, unfocused. The coffee dripped down her sweater, pooling into a soggy, sticky wound. The detective's voice called over his shoulder. "Third-degree assault. Call an ambulance." But the wound wasn't just on her skin. It was deeper. What scalded her wasn't the coffee. It was the question baked into Chloe's stare. "Why are you here?" A woman in her 60s with a nurse's badge and silver braids knelt down beside Simone. "I'm retired, but I know what I'm doing," she said gently. Simone nodded, stepping aside just enough. The nurse pressed cool cloth to Tiana's chest. "Shallow burns. She's in shock. We've got to lower her body temp and calm the nervous system." The cafe fell quiet. A stunned silence, full of witnesses who had seen too much and done too little. Tiana's lips parted like she might speak, but the words didn't form. Her voice didn't break. It folded inward like paper under rain. She blinked once. That was all. A man in a business suit set down his coffee and whispered to no one. "That could have been my daughter." And that's when people began to move. Not with panic, but with purpose. Phones recorded, statements were prepared, and the cafe transformed from sanctuary to stage. So now let me ask you, if you had been there, watching her flinch, watching her freeze as the heat soaked her skin, would you have stepped in? Would you have shouted? Would you have offered ice? Or would you have stared at your coffee, hoping it would cool faster than your courage? Because the truth is, it's easy to say we would have done more. It's harder to admit that too often we wait for permission. But that morning, Tiana didn't ask for permission to be seen. She just sat. She breathed. She read. And that was enough to be assaulted. So the question isn't whether justice stepped in. The question is, why did it have to? Because this wasn't just a burn. It was a spark. And someone finally noticed the fire. At the hospital, Tiana didn't cry. She didn't speak. She lay on the narrow bed while nurses cleaned the burns and doctors whispered medical terms that bounced off her silence like rain on glass. Simone stayed close, answering what she could, nodding when she had to, but watching her sister the entire time. Tiana flinched at touch, blinked slow, and kept one hand curled at her chest like she was still holding her book, even though it had been left behind. They said the burns weren't severe, mostly superficial, some second degree. But Simone knew the real injury wasn't on her skin. It was behind her eyes. At home, she moved through the apartment like a ghost of herself, wrapped in blankets, not for warmth, but as armor. She moved like furniture being covered in plastic. Protected, but not alive. Days passed. The pain faded, but the silence didn't. Tiana stopped opening emails. She didn't respond to her professors or answer calls from concerned friends. She didn't touch the books stacked on her nightstand. The apartment lights stayed dim, her tea untouched. Simone brought her favorite things: scented candles, playlists she once loved. But nothing broke through. She paced the hallway at night, sometimes opening the door just to stare into the quiet. Simone recognized the signs. This was grief. Grief for safety lost, dignity fractured, identity questioned. And the worst part? Tiana didn't ask for help. She didn't say anything at all. Because trauma doesn't always cry. Sometimes it just disappears. But outside their apartment, the world hadn't forgotten. The detectives followed up. The baristas called to check in. A student who had filmed the incident emailed to offer the footage, already sent to the DA. A handwritten note arrived from a woman who had sat near the fireplace that morning. "I froze, but I see you now. I'm sorry." And slowly, quietly, support began to pool. Not in loud waves, but in small, deliberate gestures. A woman left fresh flowers on their doorstep with a card that read, "You don't know me, but I believe you." The cafe manager emailed, "Your book is safe, and your seat is still yours." Because sometimes kindness is an extra chair pulled close without being asked. And sometimes it's the silence of a room rearranged so you don't have to ask where you belong. Simone carried it all. She carried her sister's silence, the weight of her stillness, and the rage that pressed against her ribcage like a bruise that wouldn't fade. She stayed up late reading about trauma, watching TED Talks, printing out articles from psychology journals. She learned about sensory sensitivity, about the fear of being touched, the disconnection from voice. She memorized the stages of recovery like a syllabus. But none of that prepared her for the feeling of powerlessness. Because how do you hold someone who doesn't want to be touched, but doesn't want to be alone? How do you speak to someone who isn't sure their voice is allowed back in the room? How do you protect someone when the hurt has already happened and the threat was never a weapon, but a face, a name, a look? Simone didn't know, but she stayed anyway. So now I ask you, have you ever had to hold your strength for someone who couldn't carry theirs? Have you ever had to be both the shield and the silence? Simone didn't choose this moment. Neither did Tiana, but here they were, and the world for once was watching. But what happens when the law finally notices? What does accountability look like when it's not broadcast on a loop, but stitched quietly into the next chapter? Because the fight wasn't over. The burn had started something. The question wasn't whether justice would come. The question was, would it show up the way Tiana needed it to? Or would it once again arrive too late and too loud? The courtroom was quiet in a way that didn't feel empty. It felt heavy, as if the walls themselves had waited too long to hear something true. Light filtered through narrow windows, catching dust motes that floated like suspended breath. The judge entered. No fanfare, just footsteps on polished floor. A gavel tapped, not to silence chaos, but to give form to something long overdue. Tiana sat on the second row, not in the witness box, not on the stand, her advocate beside her, a quiet woman in a gray suit, with eyes that never left her face. The video began to play. The same cafe. The same voices. Chloe's tone rising, Simone's reply, then that awful silence before the splash. Tiana's gasp, small but piercing. And then the chaos. No one made a sound as it played. Because truth doesn't always come with volume. Sometimes it just lands. Hard. Like memory. And that courtroom bench didn't creak. It groaned. Tiana didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the room more than Chloe's protests ever had. People turned to look, not out of curiosity, but recognition. They saw her now. Not just the girl who had been hurt, but the woman who still showed up. Her bandages were gone, but the mark was still there, in the stiffness of her shoulders, in the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. Her silence echoed like a choir behind closed lips. No song, just truth humming beneath the surface. A truth too often muted. A truth that now refused to sit quietly anymore. She wasn't asked to testify, but her being there said more than any words could. She didn't need to speak. The room spoke for her now. Chloe sat at the defendant's table, her appearance subdued. No sunglasses, no coat cinched too tight, just a too pale foundation and eyes darting anywhere but toward the screen. The prosecutor stood, composed, direct. We present 3 charges: third-degree assault, public endangerment, and malicious provocation with intent to harm. The judge nodded. Chloe's attorney tried to spin it. Stress, misunderstanding, sensory overload. Her voice had volume. Her actions had heat. And her intent had fangs. She wasn't tried by public opinion. She was undone by her own volume, her own video, her own moment caught in time where cruelty wasn't just felt, it was filmed. When the judge ruled to proceed to trial, Chloe broke. Her voice, once smug and sharp, cracked. I didn't mean it like that. But the courtroom stayed still. Because now it wasn't about how she meant it. It was about what she did. Outside, no one cheered. There were no signs, no chants, just a group of people standing. Simone beside Tiana, the cafe manager, the nurse. Even the barista who had forgotten to sleeve Chloe's coffee that day. They all stood together, not in protest, but in witness. Justice didn't clap. It exhaled. The air was different now, not cleaner, just cleared. And when Tiana finally turned to leave, she did it slowly, deliberate, not because the pain was gone, but because now the story was hers again, and everyone had heard it. In the months that followed, Portland's city council passed what they quietly named the Blake Provision Tiana's Law. It required businesses open to the public to display clear anti-discrimination protocols, train staff in de-escalation for bias-driven incidents, and create a fast-track reporting system for victims. No fanfare, no parade, just signatures and the soft click of a vote that mattered. It was empathy made law. Because Tiana never asked for change. She didn't write letters or hold signs. She simply sat in a cafe and was burned for existing. And, in her silence, something louder emerged. She didn't file a petition. Her stillness did. Tiana's first time back in public wasn't to shop, it wasn't to study. It was to speak. At a healing panel, months later, she stood behind a podium at a community hall filled with folding chairs and folding hearts. She wore a simple sweater, and when she gripped the mic, her hand trembled, but her words didn't. I didn't want to teach this lesson, she said, but I hope no one else has to. Her voice was like a lamp, low but steady. She spoke not to relive, but to reframe. I'm not brave, she told them. I just didn't want to disappear. And when she finished, there were no standing ovations. Just people standing still, listening the way they should have that day in the cafe. Simone took a different path. While Tiana healed, Simone trained. She joined a local advocacy group teaching bystander intervention, what to do when a stranger's hate tries to write someone else's story. She led workshops, role-played chaos, and helped people find their voice before silence found them. "You don't need to be perfect," she told one room of volunteers. "You just need to stop pretending you didn't see it." She turned her fury into furniture, built space for others to rest, to speak, to prepare for whatever came next. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was good work. It was necessary work. And now the ask: would you have believed her without the video? Would you have sided with the one who stayed quiet or the one who yelled the loudest? Because justice wasn't won with volume, it was built with verification. And while kindness may look soft on the outside, it's scaffolding. It holds people up. It reinforces what truth can't carry alone. The world didn't change because Tiana was hurt. The world shifted because she kept showing up. So as we move to the last chapter, one more question lingers. What do we do with the stories we're given? Do we archive them like headlines, or do we echo them in action? What remains is what we carry. And Tiana's story, her silence, her strength, her seat at that cafe, it's now ours to protect. A season passed. Tiana's hair, once trimmed away by scald and shame, had grown back in soft, deliberate coils. She didn't rush the process. She let it grow with the same patience she now gave herself. One quiet morning, she returned to the Elm Tree Cafe, not to conquer fear, not to prove anything, just to read. Same cafe, different corner, not the one by the bookshelf. That seat belonged to a different chapter, but a table by the window where the light came in slow and gentle. The barista, now older, a little grayer, didn't say a word when he brought her tea. Jasmine, of course. He simply placed it down with a nod, as if handing over something sacred. And Tiana didn't smile wide or speak loud. She didn't need to reclaim the space. She became it. The cafe had changed in small ways. New chairs, a chalkboard with daily affirmations, a framed photo in the corner showing a blurry freeze frame of that moment. The detectives stepping in, the chaos caught mid-breath. It was signed at the bottom, for every quiet voice that stayed. On this morning, a child, maybe 9, maybe 10, walked past Tiana's table with her mom. She paused, tugged her sleeve. "Mama," she whispered. "That's the girl from the video," her mother shushed her gently. But Tiana looked up and offered a soft, steady smile. "I'm still her," she said. The child grinned, wide-eyed, then walked away, holding her mother's hand a little tighter. Fame fades, but integrity, it lingers. It lingers. It doesn't need to be recognized to remain. Weeks later, at a local library, Tiana sat quietly in the back of a youth poetry workshop. She wasn't leading. She was just there. But when a shy girl near the front hesitated, poem clutched in her hand like a shield, Tiana moved. She knelt beside her, not to take the stage, but to hand her the mic. "You don't have to shout," she said. "Just read it like it's yours." And the girl did, voice shaking, hands trembling, but she read it. When she finished, Tiana didn't clap. She nodded. She stayed, because that's what kindness is. Not loud, not scripted, just presence when it matters. She didn't shout. She handed the mic. And now to you, the listener, the reader, the witness, if this story stirred something in you, don't just comment. Don't just scroll. Call someone. Check on someone. Protect someone's peace like it's your own. Because justice isn't always a headline. It's not always a courtroom or a hashtag. Sometimes it wears soft clothes, drinks warm tea, and chooses to show up again quietly, bravely, still breathing. The story of Tiana didn't end with applause. It didn't end with court dates or cameras. It continues in the way she walks into rooms now, in the way people watch a little longer, listen a little closer. It continues every time someone chooses empathy over entitlement, every time silence is no longer mistaken for weakness. Because silence doesn't mean surrender. It means the story isn't over yet. And if you're still listening, You're part of how it continues. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.